The life of a homeless person must seem hard, but imagine going through it with your little kid, with nothing to eat, no place to sleep, and no one to call for help. When everything seems lost, and there are thousands of reasons to give up, that's exactly when you need to fight the hardest. This is a true story that will most likely break your hearts. The story begins in San Francisco, 1981, with Chris Gardner and his son, Christopher Jr. They've spent most of their lives in poverty, and Chris can't even afford a proper school for his child. So he leaves him every day at an improvised, low-cost childcare service. After that, Chris goes out to try and sell the X-ray device used to scan bone density. Parking tickets kept piling up, and he lost his vehicle. While waiting at the bus station, a man with mental issues approaches him, saying it must be a time machine. He continues telling everyone on the bus that Chris has a time machine, but it's just a medical device Chris is trying to sell for a living, but has trouble doing so, since most hospitals find it unnecessary and too expensive. Chris has to sell at least 2 scanners a month to cover rent and daycare for his child, but he hasn't sold any in a while. Trying to make ends meet, Chris's wife, Linda, has to work double shifts at a laundromat. Later that night, while the family is having dinner, Linda gets mad at him because they haven't paid their taxes in 2 months. The interest is rising, and so is the penalty. He tries to calm her down, saying he'll figure it out, but she won't even listen and storms off to her second shift at work. After Chris puts his son to bed, he plays with a Rubik's Cube. They were a new thing back then, and everyone thought it was impossible to solve. But the truth is, Chris has always been smart. Life just didn't go easy on him. The next day, Chris notices a man with a beautiful, expensive-looking car and asks him what he does for a living. And he tells him that he's a stockbroker. When Chris asks if a college degree is required, the man says it's not necessary. You just need to be good with numbers and with people. Chris starts observing all the people entering and leaving the building. They all seem so damn happy, and he wishes he could look like that. The next day, Chris tells his wife that he's going to stop by the broker's firm to see if they have any job openings. But his wife isn't exactly supportive. She just throws out some humiliating comments. When he asks her not to talk to him like that, she argues, saying their rent is due next week, and they haven't paid it in 3 months. She's scared they might get kicked out of their home. She tells him to sell the devices he has, and to get out of that business because it's killing them. The flashback shows that Chris spent their entire life savings on those devices. He bought a bunch of them, delivered directly to their house. Later that day, Chris arrives at the broker's firm and asks a girl outside to watch over his bone scanner until he gets back. He warns her not to steal it, saying even he can't sell it, and it's his job. Once inside, a man hands him a paper and tells him to fill out the internship application. But while the man is explaining things, Chris glances out the window and sees the girl walking off with his bone scanner. He quickly tells the man he'll finish the application later and storms out. He starts chasing the woman into the subway and sees her entering a train. He rushes down there, but the train is already on its way. And just like that, his bone scanner is gone. The next day, Chris intercepts the broker's firm manager, Jay Twistle, hoping to give him the application personally. Chris wishes he could sit down and talk with him, but Jay seems to be in a hurry. After he leaves the building, Chris spots the girl with his bone scanner and immediately starts running toward her. Knowing that losing one is like losing a month's worth of groceries, he follows her onto a bus and manages to get his scanner back. After picking up his son from childcare, Junior reminds him that he was supposed to come back without any device, and now he has 2. And when they get home, his wife is stunned to see him coming back with 2 devices. Even though the situation is really hard, Chris and his wife manage to buy a basketball for their son's birthday. But the look on her face shows she's deeply unhappy with her life. She doesn't even want to talk to Chris, and when he tries to explain that he's doing his best to pull them out of this situation, she just doesn't care anymore. Another month passes, and Chris returns to the broker's company, trying to intercept Jay Twistle and beg him for a moment of his time. When Jay tells him he's in a hurry, Chris jumps into a cab with him. He starts talking about his experience, trying to convince him that he's the right person for the job, while Jay is playing with a Rubik's Cube. Jay interrupts him, saying solving a Rubik's Cube is impossible. Chris tells him he can do it. He begins solving the cube, and Jay watches in disbelief. The cab arrives at its destination, but Jay doesn't seem to be in a rush anymore. He waits while Chris finally solves the puzzle in a matter of minutes. Jay is pretty amazed and steps out of the cab. Chris then tells the driver to go back a couple of blocks, having no idea what to do now, since the taxi meter shows $1,800, and his wallet is dry as a desert. When the cab stops, Chris quickly gets out and starts running away, desperately apologizing to the driver. As he runs, the driver chases after him, threatening to kill him. Chris rushes down into the subway, thinking he finally shook off the driver, but the man is still following, demanding his money. He jumps into the train just as the doors close. but he can't get his scanner inside. The train begins moving, and Chris loses his scanner once again. He rushes to the payphone and apologizes to his wife for not making it home on time, but she informs him that she's leaving. She's already packed her things, and she's taking their son with her. Chris quickly boards the bus, his heart breaking apart just like his life. He runs home as fast as he can. When he gets there, he sees that his family is already gone. All of their stuff gone. Suddenly the phone rings and he answers. On the other end is Jay Twistle, calling to invite him for an interview for the internship. Jay starts giving him his secretary's phone number, but Chris doesn't even have a pen or paper in the house. As Jay recites the number, Chris repeats it out loud, desperately trying to remember it. Then Jay tells him to call tomorrow for the details. Chris immediately rushes to the store to write the number down before he forgets it. The next day, he intercepts his wife on her way to work, yelling at her to never take his son away from him again. She tells him she wants to leave because she's not happy anymore. Chris tells her to go, but Christopher is staying with him. At the end of that day, he goes to pick up his son from childcare, and Christopher Jr. is asking about his mom, worried about where he's going to sleep tonight. His father tells him he's taking him home, where he belongs. He then takes him home and prepares some burgers. But when things are bad, they always get worse. Someone knocks on the door. It's the landlord. He wants the rent money, and Chris doesn't have it. The landlord tells him they have to leave the house by tomorrow. Chris begs him to stay, saying he has his son with him, and even promises to paint the walls if the landlord gives him more time. The landlord agrees to give him one more week. The next morning, Chris is painting the place when the police show up at his door. Chris has too many unpaid parking tickets, and they take him to the station. There, they make him pay every single one. Chris gives up his last penny to avoid jail, but the verification process is scheduled for tomorrow morning, so he has to spend the night behind bars anyway. He starts yelling, explaining there's no one to take care of his son. The officer threatens that maybe they'll have social services pick him up. Chris demands his right to a phone call and immediately calls his wife, begging her to pick up Christopher Jr. from daycare, promising that he'll come for him tomorrow. The next morning, Chris checks out of jail as fast as he can and starts running toward the broker's firm. Because he's already late for the internship interview, he manages to get there on time, nervously waiting for them to call out his name. When they do, and he steps into the office, he witnesses complete chaos. Thousands of workers talking on their phones, yelling, moving, and walking around. He then sits in the office with the company's owners and managers, explaining why he's dressed the way he is, how he got arrested, and how he ran all the way there just to make it on time. Jay tells his boss, Martin, that Chris is very determined, and how he waited outside for a month with some 40-kilo device. Martin asks Jay if he's ever seen Chris dressed like this before, and Jay answers truthfully, saying Chris is always dressed like a gentleman, in a suit and tie. As Martin reads Chris's resume, we learn that Chris was the best in his high school class, but there were only 12 kids in it. So Chris adds that he was also top of his class in the Navy. Martin doesn't seem impressed, so Chris tells him that he's the kind of person who, if he doesn't know the answer to a question, they can be sure he knows how to find the answer, and he will find the answer. Martin then wonders, if a guy shows up to a job interview with no shirt, and he hires him, what would Chris say? And Chris's answer is, he must have had on some really nice pants. It makes everyone laugh really hard. After the interview ends, Jay comes up to him, saying he doesn't know how Chris managed to pull it off dressed like a garbage man, but Chris tells him he can't accept the internship because he didn't know there was no salary. Jay tells him he can't give up now, because that would make him look like an asshole in front of the partners. The problem is, there's no salary, no real promise of a job. One intern gets hired at the end of the program, from the pool of 20, and the only resources Chris will have for the next 6 months are the 6 scanners he still hasn't sold. Later that night, Linda brings Christopher Jr., who's asleep, and puts him to bed. She then informs Chris that her sister's boyfriend opened a restaurant and they have a job for her, so she's going to New York. But Chris's only response is that Christopher is staying with him. When she asks what he's going to do for money, he tells her he's going to stand out in his internship program. She then takes one last look at her son and tells Chris that she knows he'll take good care of him. Then she leaves, for good. He calls Jay Twistle's office and leaves a message, saying he very much appreciates the invitation to the program and that he gladly accepts. With no money left for rent, he starts packing all of their things. The next morning, he loads everything into his friend's car. They'll be staying at a nearby motel, much smaller, but cheaper. After making breakfast for Christopher Jr., he takes him out for a game of basketball. Chris then takes his child to work with him, trying to sell those scanners. And Christopher Jr. must have brought him some good fortune, because Chris finally manages to sell one of them. The next day, Chris is woken up by his alarm clock. His internship is finally starting. The manager explains to all 20 interns that, for the next 6 months, they'll be calling companies, potential clients, offering their services. It's simple. X number of calls equals X number of prospects. X number of prospects equals X number of customers. X number of customers equals X number of dollars in the company's pocket. And at the end, they'll face a final board exam. He tells them to take a 10-minute break and be back. Chris heads out to grab something to eat when he runs into Martin. Martin starts telling him how things used to be during his internship days. Suddenly, Chris sees the mentally ill man from before, carrying one of his scanners. He quickly apologizes to Martin and runs after the man. During the chase, he gets hit by a car. When he gets back up, one of his shoes is missing, and he can't find it anywhere. So, Chris returns to the internship office, with only one shoe. Every day, Chris showed up early. He worked really hard, but the office manager kept asking him for all sorts of favors. He constantly interrupted Chris's work, which made him feel underrated and unappreciated. But still, he kept trying. He was giving it everything he had. By 4 p.m., he had to catch the bus to pick up his son from childcare. Then he had to drive all across town just to get home. Whoever brought in the most money in 6 months was usually the one who got hired. They were all working their way up the call sheets to sign clients. From the bottom to the top, from the doorman to the CEO, everyone stayed until 7 p.m. But he had Christopher, so he had to do in 6 hours what everyone else did in 9. To save time, he didn't hang up the phone between calls. That gave him 8 extra minutes every day. He didn't drink water either, to avoid wasting time in the bathroom. But even after all of this, 2 months in, and he still hadn't worked his way up the sheet. So he made a decision to skip a few names on the list. Chris calls the CEO of the pension fund, Walter Ribbon, and asks for the opportunity to sit with him and discuss some of their products. Walter tells him to be there in 20 minutes. Knowing he's already far away, Chris rushes out. But the office manager stops him again, telling him to move his car to another street. Without giving Chris time to explain, he just hands over the keys and walks away. Instead, Chris decides to use the manager's car to get there on time. Traffic is heavy, and when he gets close, Chris leaves the car and starts running. But when he arrives and asks for Walter, the secretary informs him that he just missed him. Frustrated, Chris returns to the car, only to find another parking ticket waiting for him. Later that night, as he's filling out the form to pay the ticket, Chris tells him he has to come with him this week to try and sell another scanner. Then possibly, he'll take him to watch a football game. They walk all day trying to sell the scanner, with no luck. Chris then decides to go to the luxurious home where Walter Ribbon lives. He apologizes for missing their meeting the other day. Walter tells him he didn't need to come all the way just to say that. Chris lies, saying they were on their way to a football game and just happened to be in the neighborhood. To his surprise, Walter invites them to go to the game with him. Chris immediately agrees, hoping to use the opportunity to talk business. Even during the game, he tries to explain what his company can offer. But Walter cuts him off, saying he had no idea Chris was new at the firm, and there's no way he's going to let someone new direct their funds. Chris's heart sinks. That was a real shot, and he missed it. Seeing how much his son is enjoying the game, he holds it together, not wanting to ruin the moment. But the pain is still visible in his eyes. Still, Chris wasn't about to give up. He kept studying late into the night, being a father during the day. After 4 months, they finally sold all the scanners. It seemed like they were making it, doing okay. Until one day, a letter arrived that brought Chris crashing back to reality. Because he hadn't paid his taxes, the government took all the money from his bank account. No warning, nothing. That was the day Chris went completely broke. He had only $21 left. He was being chased for rent. And when he asked his friends for help, they ignored him. Everything was crashing down on him. Then, one afternoon at the park with his son, Chris noticed the mentally ill man again, carrying one of his scanners. He immediately started running after him. He caught up, and the man kept rambling about wanting to go back to the 60s. The next day, he went to try and sell the device again, but it wasn't working properly, and the doctor was instantly put off, refusing to buy it. After returning to their apartment that night, they find all their belongings thrown outside. The key no longer works. They're locked out, with nowhere to go. When Chris tells his son that they can't stay there anymore, the poor child begins to cry and begs his father to open the door. Chris gently tells him to stop and to come with him. They end up sitting at a train station with Chris completely devastated. But then, he remembers, he's not the only one hurting. Christopher Jr. is in this with him, just as deep. Trying to lift his spirits, Chris pretends that the scanner is actually a time machine. We just need to press this. As they press it together, Chris begins to pretend, saying there are dinosaurs walking all around them. The child's imagination kicks in. Chris warns him not to step into the caveman's fire. They're going to need it since there's no electricity. Junior screams out that a T-Rex is approaching. Chris tells him to grab his things. They need to find shelter. He hurries him into the train station bathroom, calling it a cave, and says, "We're safe in here." Later that night, in that cold train station bathroom, the father sits holding his sleeping son in his lap. The boy rests peacefully. and the father cries, quietly, so he doesn't wake him. It's a moment of silent heartbreak, where love means hiding your pain to protect the one you love most. The next day, Chris and his son wait in a line where free shelter rooms are handed out to the homeless, for one night only. The line is long, and the shelter worker announces they have only 4 spots left. Suddenly, a man cuts in front of Chris and his son. Chris tells him to move. He was there first, and a fight breaks out between them. Staff rush in and pull them apart, telling both to leave the line. Chris, desperate and angry, yells that he was there on time. Then another homeless man speaks up, saying Chris was there first, and the men lets them go inside. Once inside, Chris gives his son a bath over the sink. Suddenly the lights go off. It's time for everyone to sleep. He tucks Junior into bed. The poor child looks at him and softly says that he wants to go home. Later, Chris goes outside the room and tries to fix the broken scanner. He spends the entire night studying, using the faint glow of light coming through a small window, just enough for him to read. The next morning, Chris goes to work. He meets with customers, puts on a fake smile, and gets through his calls quickly. He learned to finish fast, because he had to be in line for a shelter room by 5. He also takes his son to church, where they listen to the choir and orchestra. Chris holds his boy tightly. Christopher Jr. is the only thing holding him together, the only reason he hasn't completely fallen apart. They get free meals at the church, and Chris doesn't waste a second. He studies even while eating. When the day of the final exam comes, one intern finishes it in a matter of minutes. Chris hurries through his too, trying to make it to the shelter line on time. In the elevator, one guy brags about how easy the test was. Chris casually mentions he struggled with the essay question on the back. The man's face changes, confused. He clearly didn't see the question. As Chris exits the building, Martin stops him, asking to borrow $5. He forgot his wallet upstairs. Chris offers to run and grab it, but Martin is in a rush. Chris opens his wallet. He only has $11. Still, he hands over $5, but by the time he reaches the shelter line, it's too late. The quota is full. With no other options, Chris takes a long bus ride with his son to the hospital, where he sells his blood, desperate for money. He earns $24. From that, he spends $8 on a small light bulb. He needs it to fix the scanner. Later that night, they're sleeping at another homeless shelter, and Junior wonders if Mom left because of him. His father tells him that she left because of herself, and that he had nothing to do with that. Junior then tells him that he is a good dad. When Junior falls asleep, Chris opens up the scanner and replaces some parts, making it work once again. The next morning, he goes back to the doctor who previously declined the offer and manages to sell it. $250, 4 more weeks of oxygen. After sleeping in the hotel, Chris is back at work. He hasn't stopped trying, even after the exam, even if he doesn't know if he will even get the job. Later, while he's making some calls, the office manager calls for him to come. When he enters the office, they ask him to sit down. Chris tells them he thought to wear a shirt today, being the last day. And Martin tells him to wear it tomorrow, because tomorrow will be his first day. If he'd like to work here as a broker. With his eyes full of tears, he tells them that he would like that. They wonder if it was as easy as Chris made it look, and he tells them it wasn't at all. Then everyone stands up to congratulate him. Just before he leaves, Martin gives him back his $5. He gets out to the streets and his mind is racing. He made it. All the trouble, all the pain and suffering. It was worth it. He then runs to the child care and just picks up his son and holds him tightly, knowing his little boy will never have to suffer again. After beginning his career at Dean Witter Broker's firm, Chris went on to found his own investment firm in 1987. In 2006, Chris sold a minority stake in his brokerage firm for a multi-million-dollar deal. And that's where this true story ends. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video. Thanks for watching.